Well, I was the director of core services at the local community mental health center. And part of the range of services that were offered was we did detoxification from alcohol. And I was concerned about the recovery rates of folks that went through the program. When I looked at the research, out of my concern for the patients getting healthy, the research showed that the longer a patient stays in treatment, the outcomes get better. Back then the model was actually when I first started, the model was a 42-day model. Then actually managed care made an arrangement with Blue Cross in New York. Instead of 42 days, they arranged what's now known as the 28-day program. Again, if you think about it, for the first couple of weeks somebody begins their treatment episode. They're just coming out of the fog of their drinking or drugging. They probably don't even remember most of the lectures they attended. So then after the 2 weeks, you only have 2 more weeks to bring it up to the 28 days to really help the patient gain some insight into their addictive process, and just as importantly, what would sabotage their recovery. So I started Caron Renaissance, back then it was called Renaissance Institute, as a longer-term treatment program. Now ironically, I actually had never been in a treatment center, either as a patient nor as a staff member. So I was actually using what I thought was the best concepts of quality psychotherapy in combination with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous to create a blend of a program that would both address a patient's addiction and any psychological or psychiatric or family systems issues that might inhibit, if not actually sabotage, the recovery process. The process starts off with an intensive amount of clinical work, psychotherapy, counseling sessions, going to Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever 12-step program fits with that person's particular addiction. But we're a long-term process. So at a certain point in time, as the patient starts to show improvement, we allow the patient to have responsibilities, real-life responsibilities. That helps us to assess whether the patient is actually doing well and able to bring their recovery into their life, or is it just words that they're saying in treatment that sounds good, but that the patient really doesn't have the skills to actually put into effect. So we want the patient to try out their recovery in real-world circumstance. For example, our clinical offices are on one campus and the patient lives at the residential campus. There's staff there 24/7, but they're living in apartments with roommates and responsible, just like if you were going to college and you lived in an apartment and had roommates. That's all part of how we assess whether the patient can do well, even though they might be saying things that sound like they're well, but can they actually do well? And I think that takes longer-term treatment. There are many different issues to help the patient work through. Some of them came out of their addiction, some of them might have predated their addiction. So there's a lot of work to be done to be in recovery and be comfortable with yourself so you don't fall back to picking up a drink or a drug. It's a match made in heaven, that the work that the rabbi can do and the way we can work together. I think it's a wonderful partnership. I think it's a unique partnership. I just see it as we're one team. I mean, you know, we're believing that people can heal, people are resilient, people can change their life in very dramatic ways towards the better. So I see the Jewish Recovery Center and Caron Renaissance is coming from the same core principles that, again, God has given us an inalienable right to recover, that nobody can take away from us as long as we pursue it. This is a whole different way to look at it. In other words, instead of looking at the failures to recover, let's look at the success. Let's look at what created that success, rather than just looking at what wasn't working for the individual. We know through the fellowship of what does work, what does help people get better. And that takes a coming together. It does take a village in that sense to create recovery. One of the strongest parts that we need in recovery as individuals is to not recover as an individual, to recover as part of a fellowship, to use the wisdom, to use the support, sometimes to use the constructive criticism or confrontation of your fellows. The Shabbaton is a time where we can gather together and discuss issues of recovery. You know, there still is the stigma, there still is a certain degree of shame that people feel even about their past. Even though now they're in recovery, they still tend to want to remain anonymous and confidential about it. Where the Shabbaton, you're surrounded by people that have had similar experiences and have been able to make significant progress and now celebrate their new life. So to be able to do it totally uninhibited by what the outside world might or might not think is a wonderful opportunity I wish we had more of.